Hello and welcome back to the Ambassadors of Gaming. My name is Ambassador Michael and I will be doing our Patreon exclusive this month. I thought it might be fun to revisit the past, and so what I've done here is selected 10 games from my childhood that were either extremely interesting to me or extremely nostalgic to me, whether or not they were good. So we have 10 games here. We're going to run through them, and some of the descriptions here may be a little short, depending on what I have to say about the game and how familiar you may or may not be with the game. The less familiar, the more in depth I'll go. But if you're familiar with the game or the series, I am kind of just gonna name it, describe what I liked about it, and move on. So without further ado, here we go. The first game on our list here is Digimon World 2. Digimon World 2 is an old school dungeon crawler. This is the game in the series that actually seems to be the most hated, due to people preferring the style of Digimon World 1's caretaker system or the more open combat of Digimon World 3 and its more open world. The reason that this is my favorite is that it introduced me to the dungeon crawling mechanics, RPG mechanics, classes, and the idea of recycling your Digimon so that a level 1 may have higher stats than a level capped Digimon. I really believe that this is the source of the inspiration for the Digimon games that we got here recently, the Cyber Sleuth Digimon story games, and helped spawn those more RPG-like games. Other than the warm fuzzy feelings I get when remembering Spyro II, I cannot exactly tell you why, because it's been so long since I've played it, that it makes this list. For nostalgia's sake, I'm putting it on. I specifically remember it being the only Spyro game I played on the PlayStation 1. But I also remember it fondly and nostalgically, and I remember having a grand old time with it. Spyro had simple mechanics, was bright, wonderful, and had characters that were just a blast to be around. Animal Crossing was the first game that showed me that mundane tasks can be fun, if done in moderation. Pulling weeds, going fishing, digging up dinosaur bones. The game had plenty of silly little things you could do to earn some of that sweet, sweet cash to pay off your loan shark, Mr. Tom Nook. Custom Robo is a game I think many may have forgotten. A mech RPG that involved building your own custom robot. Instead of just having armor and weapons, there were cosmetic differences to the armor and weaponry you used, along with a set of prerequisites. Certain pieces only worked with certain cores. Arena-based combat helped shape this game into something memorable, and I truly believe deserves another chance at life. Budokai III was the fighting game to end fighting games for me. As I have discussed before, with more annual releases or iterative releases such as sports games, you kind of end up just picking the one you like the mechanics of the most, and that's the one you play in perpetuity. Budokai 3 to this day I think has the best mechanics, customization, and roster of any of the Dragon Ball fighting games. Granted, I have not played fighters. Budokai 3 nailed aesthetic combos and gameplay perfectly, and I still boot up the PS2 to play it even to this day. The King of All Monsters got its own fighting game. I have so much nostalgia specifically for this game due to it being one of the few games I remember being able to play with my brother and us enjoying it together, regardless of whether or not one of us lost. The destructible environments and a large roster of kaiju offered a robust gameplay experience that I think few fighting games have been able to replicate. Wind Waker was my first foray into Zelda, and the first game I had played that was cel-shaded. Wind Waker was a large experience, and one of the few games I remember being able to actually beat as a child. While Wind Waker is one of the longest games I remember playing as a child, and through childhood, I also felt it was one of the most rewarding. The character, story, and aesthetics were like nothing I had seen, even to this day, and I long for it to come to Switch. Luigi's Mansion was an unconventional game and required much less dexterity than the Super Mario games that preceded it. I fell in love with its silly and spooky aesthetic. The mansion and its ghost resemble something like the Haunted Mansion or Casper the Friendly Ghost. Each ghost had a unique personality and looks, while Luigi was equally as frightened of all of them regardless of how silly they were. Luigi is a goofy character that I always adored and felt wasn't given enough attention, but when Nintendo decided to officially give him his own game, it was indeed a cult classic. Double Dash was my first experience with Mario Kart. As the GameCube was the first Nintendo system we owned in our house, Double Dash was like the other games mentioned here, unique in its approach and aesthetics that I couldn't help but to love it. It was a departure from the standard one-player kart racer we were accustomed to with the SNES and N64 versions. This version also allowed for co-op in most of its mode due to the gameplay relying on one character to use items and the other to drive. Characters were divided up into weight classes. This also changed the gameplay, meaning only certain characters and combinations of characters could use certain cards. Overall, it seems that Double Dash didn't didn't seem to impress many, as we have not seen even a port of it come to other consoles. The last game on my list is Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime was a little advanced for me as a child, and as such I don't remember completing it, but I remember being blown away by it. It was the first time I had experienced an FPS. The aesthetics that went into the game, the themes and mood it set were perfectly spooky, and I remember being terrified of it. I remember when looking back, thinking of the alien aesthetics and the influence of its predecessor, and I do yearn to play it to completion. So there you have 10 of the games I remember from my childhood that I remember nostalgically, that I enjoyed quite frequently. I do have more games on this list, however I've decided not to include them. So if you are interested in seeing more of this list, please comment and let me know. However, we plan to do different sorts of things for the exclusive content here on Patreon. We hope to bring you a variety of content. If you have any suggestions, ideas, concerns, anything you would like to see, please let us know, and it's something we'll take into consideration here. So until we see you next time, thank you for being a patron. Thank you for supporting the ambassadors of gaming, and we will see you in the next one.